He finally got the contact details of the girl he liked. But just then, a large truck drove by, and a gust of wind blew the paper with her contact information away. He quickly asked her to write it again, but she firmly refused.
That was a sign! Fate's telling us to back off.
It turned out she had always believed in destiny. She thought that the wind blowing the note away was a sign from above that they weren't meant to be together. But he insisted, believing that since fate had brought them together, they were meant to be. To prove whether they were truly meant for each other, she pulled out a pen and a $5 bill. She asked him to write down his contact information and address, though he didn't understand why. He complied, but to his surprise, she didn't even look at the bill. She just walked straight to a nearby shop and used the $5 bill to buy a pack of gum, with his contact information still on it. Confused, he chased after her, asking what she was doing, but she just smiled and said,
When that $5 bill makes its way back into my hands, I'll be able to call you. And when you hear my voice on the other end, then you'll believe in fate, won't you?
He didn't believe in destiny, and the chances of this coincidence happening seemed too slim. After all, he had left his information, but she hadn't given him anything. So, to make it fair, she took out a book titled Love in the Time of Cholera. She wasn't giving it to him, though. Instead, she told him that she would write her name and contact details inside and leave the book at a random secondhand bookstore. If they were truly meant to be, he would find it and buy it. But he wasn't one to leave his future to something as uncertain as destiny. He believed in taking action, not waiting for fate to decide. Eventually, she was moved by his persistence and pulled him into a nearby hotel, saying she still wanted to leave things up to fate. They each took a separate elevator. If they ended up on the same floor, then she'd agree to be with him.
Take a breath, and then when the door closes, hit a button.
I don't understand this.
You don't have to understand, you just have to have faith.
Faith in what?
Destiny.
With that, she threw him one of her new gloves. As the elevator doors slowly closed, he stood there, completely stunned, looking at the rows of elevator buttons, unsure of what to do. In the end, he randomly pressed a floor button, unaware that it was the same floor she had chosen. As he anxiously waited for the elevator to reach his floor, it suddenly stopped on the 14th floor. A father and son stepped in, and to his surprise, the mischievous boy started pressing all the floor buttons. He was frustrated, but there was nothing he could do. When the elevator doors finally opened, she had already stepped out, and he hadn't even gotten the chance to explain. Meanwhile, she was completely unaware that he was stuck in the elevator. She waited at the exit, expecting him to appear, but time passed, and he never showed up. She began to feel a sense of disappointment. Maybe this was the final answer that fate had given them. With a heavy heart, she decided to leave, but just as the elevator doors closed behind her, he stepped out of another elevator on the same floor. However, he was still too late. He had missed her again. Perhaps love sometimes requires waiting, but more than that, it needed action. He rushed to find her, scanning the crowd frantically, but she was nowhere to be found. Regret and sadness flooded him, and in his despair, he remembered their first meeting. It had been on Christmas Day, in a busy department store. They had both reached for the last pair of black gloves. After learning it was the last pair, he had, in a gentlemanly fashion, let her have them. She had smiled and invited him to share some dessert, and from that moment on, he had found himself drawn to her. As they were about to part ways, he mustered the courage to ask for her contact details, but she had simply told him,
Well, if we're meant to meet again, then we'll meet again. It's just not the right time now.
And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving him with nothing but his hopes. He had been disappointed, thinking that would be the last time they would ever cross paths. But just as he was about to leave, he remembered his scarf had been left in the dessert shop. He went back to retrieve it, and to his surprise, found her there again. Having forgotten her gloves, they locked eyes, and it was as though something magical clicked between them. Without hesitation, she agreed to meet him again, and they spent the day skating together. They talked about their hobbies in life, and to their delight, discovered they had so much in common, similar interests, and even the same outlook on life. But while she believed in fate, he was more practical. That's when something unexpected happened. As she was skating, she slipped and fell, injuring her arm. He rushed to help, gently bandaging her wound, his concern clear in his eyes. As he did, he noticed her freckles, which she tried to hide, as they had always made her self-conscious. But he gently reassured her. Those freckles, they looked just like the constellation of Cassiopeia, unique and beautiful in their own way. Touched by his kindness and humor, she felt a spark of affection for him, and before they parted, she gave him her number. This was the moment that set everything in motion, the moment fate had brought them together. If only the wind hadn't blown away the note with her contact details, maybe they would have been together much sooner. But for now, all they could do was wait for fate to give them another chance. Time passed, and 4 years had gone by without them seeing each other. Sarah had moved to another city and, through a friend, fell in love with a talented musician. But he never paid attention to her thoughts and feelings. Even the engagement ring he bought for her was the wrong size because he hadn't put much thought into it. He didn't care if the ring hurt her when he put it on her finger. He even made her go home alone in the pouring rain one night while he went out with his friends. Meanwhile, he never forgot about her. Now successful in his career, he had a girlfriend, arranged by his parents. But every time he passed by a second-hand bookstore, he couldn't help but stop. The book Love in the Time of Cholera always caught his attention, but each time he opened it, the pages inside were always blank. There was never Sarah's contact information. Disheartened, he would walk away each time, but fate seemed to have a different plan. Sarah's name kept appearing around him. At the barber shop, the hairdresser's name was Sarah. At the golf course, the receptionist was named Sarah. And even when he was waiting at a traffic light, the song playing on the radio mentioned her name. It felt like fate was trying to remind him not to forget her. One day, he returned home and, to his surprise, found a red handbag he hadn't seen in years. Inside was the black gloves Sarah had given him. That moment, his longing to find her grew even stronger. The next day, he couldn't wait to go to the bookstore again. He searched through every shop in New York City, but the book was nowhere to be found. Exhausted, he returned home that night, but when he pulled out the glove, he noticed something. There was a piece of paper inside the glove. It was the receipt from the department store where Sarah had bought her things that day. The receipt even had her credit card number printed on it. He had a sudden realization and rushed to the bank connected to the account. After some investigation, he got the address where the most recent purchase had been made. It was at a nearby art studio. It turned out that just a few days ago, when Sarah had seen a $5 bill on a table, it reminded her of Jonathan. She smiled to herself, realizing she couldn't forget that unforgettable memory. So, in order to avoid regrets, she decided to break up with her fiancé. She and her best friend booked a trip to New York. Along the way, her friend was drawn to a wallet, and they bought the exact same one. Both of them were unknowingly on the same journey, searching for the same person. Sarah visited the department store where they had first met. She also went to the ice skating rink where they had spent time together. Even the hotel elevator that had caused their separation, she went there too. But each time, she found nothing. Then, one day, they stopped at a dessert shop to rest. When paying, Sarah didn't realize that her friend had picked up a $5 bill from the cashier. It was the same $5 bill Jonathan had written his contact information on. To her surprise, just as they were about to leave, Jonathan arrived at the shop. And so, after all these years, their paths crossed again. But as Sarah and her friend were about to head back to their hotel, her friend bumped into an old college classmate in the elevator. The classmate was about to get married and invited them to the engagement party the next day. Sarah politely declined, but what she didn't know was that the classmate was actually Jonathan's fiancé. At the same time, Jonathan, after many failed attempts, was beginning to accept that fate might have moved on. He thought that Sarah had forgotten him, or maybe she had already gotten married. He decided to accept his parents' arrangements and get engaged to the woman they chose for him. At the engagement party, everyone was happy and celebrating, but Jonathan couldn't bring himself to feel happy. However, after the party, his fiancée gave him a carefully wrapped gift. When he opened it, he was shocked to find it was a copy of Love in the Time of Cholera. His fiancée had noticed that he always stopped to look for that book whenever he passed a bookstore. She had bought it for him as a gift, hoping to give him something meaningful. As Jonathan opened the book and saw the page with Sarah's name and contact information, he couldn't believe his eyes. It was the same book from all those years ago.
What's wrong? Don't you like it?
It's perfect. It's an excellent choice.
Finally, he had Sarah's contact information. Excited, he ran out of the house, hopped on a plane, and headed to the city where she lived. But when he arrived, he accidentally uncovered an incredible secret, one that would change his life forever. What happened next? Stay tuned. I'll update you soon with the rest of the story.